We're glad to have you back. This is the Signature Morning on Signature Television, and we'll be switching guests. We'll be talking about a very important discussion right now, the impact of flooding in Niger-Benue River banks. And we have Mr. Wilfred Okeke, environmental expert. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My pleasure being here.
How are you this morning?
Very fine. Good morning.
All right, the impact of flooding in the Niger Delta, in the Niger, in the Benue, and all other states. Yeah. How would you describe flooding, the high rate of flooding in Nigeria right now?
Well, it's a really disturbing trend, right, that has been exacerbated by the issue of climate change, right? The impacts are very expensive because in 2022, about 2 million persons were affected, displaced by floods, along the banks of River Niger and Benue. And of course, you know that this comes with a huge economic impact because a country that is struggling with extreme poverty, still having to deal with the issues of flooding, that's like adding salt to an injury. And so it's something that is very worrisome. It's something that needs urgent action because we know that, for instance, the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency had issued a lot that water levels had gone up to about 9 meters, which is really troubling, which is red. It's red alert at this point because any moment from now, we're expecting that communities will be swept under the flood and all that. So we're also seeing some communities feeling flooding. And so it's something that demands an urgent action because it's really expensive for Nigeria to handle.
Well, as an environmental expert,
yes,
of course, we know that there are factors that can lead to flood.
Yeah.
But then, before we move into climate change and all of that, what are the human factors that are responsible for this? Because I understand that human beings can be a lot. So, what are the human factors?
Sometimes people develop along floodplains because there are areas that are ordinarily marked as floodplains. This is what nature has done, and when you want to distort it, there will be consequences. So sometimes people build or develop along this floodplain.
Could it be ignorantly?
Yes, mostly ignorance and, of course, failure of government regulatory agencies to check, such, because you find out some areas that are designated floodplains, people building on those plains, and you wonder where are the regulatory agencies because they know that these areas, somebody gave approvals to build in this area, somebody collected money for this approval, so you wonder what is the effectiveness of these agencies. So these are some of the issues, right? And you also see people. Sometimes you find people clog drainage lines and all that by maybe indiscriminate dumping of refuges and all that. That's on the little side. But I mean, why would you develop areas along floodplain? Just in Enugu, for instance, there's a particular place, I wouldn't want to be very specific, where you see somewhere that you know that this is actually not more than 3 meters from a tributary, and people are building up there. I mean, distorting the flow of water. So when the consequences come, it may be very expensive. And so we need to look at how these regulatory agencies perform their duty in ensuring that every development is done in a manner that does not distort nature, because it could have consequences.
So let's look at the agricultural factors right now. What long-term effects do this recurrent flooding have on the soil quality and also even the agricultural productivity of the country?
Yes, when there's flooding, ordinarily farmlands will be swept. You find people lose millions of dollars investment. We saw one that happened in Nasarawa State some 4 years ago or something, or I think it was Orland Farms and all that, losing a huge $1 million investment to floods, right? So we see the food crisis that we face here. And so we're afraid, as environmental experts, we're afraid that when these floods come, they would, of course, sweep farmland. And that also would mean that the food scarcity would, worsen, right? And of course, you mentioned soil quality. It has a way of destroying soil quality because it washes away topsoil. Some of those ones that provide nutrients for plants to grow and all that. So when these floods come, they wash them away. So like I'm saying, our concern is that we do not have the infrastructure to be able to navigate through these impacts, right? So we must be able to act as proactive as possible to avoid it from happening because we do not have the capacity to manage some of the impacts. We may not be able to completely stall it from happening, but we could actually take proactive steps to ensure that when it happens, it's as minimal as possible.
I know environmental procedures or things that that farmers in person can do to prevent the high, level of loss during this flooding?
Yeah, when you talk about the magnitude of flooding we're talking about, I mean, there's little or nothing that the local farmer can do, right? It's really because when what maybe it's a flash flood, I mean, you will not be able to withstand that. And so, for instance, along that river, Niger Basin, we should also have maybe talking about constructing maybe additional 2 dams,
Okay.
because water levels is rising as a result of climate change, and we must be able to manage it. We saw what happened in Maiduguri a few months ago when Alu Dam failed, right, releasing water, destroying lives and properties. So along that basin, we also need additional dams, not just Kainji and Deba and all. We need other dams, which will also help agricultural activities. So government should look at that and also look at dredging some of these water bodies, right? It also, when you dredge, it will also enhance inland water transportation. We're talking about, for instance, if you go to Onitsha, the River Niger port there, it's not as functional as it's supposed to be, because the water, you see what's happening with the dredging. Today the government is on it, tomorrow they are off it. So government should also look at dredging some of these water bodies to enhance inland water transportation and also to help check the problem of flood.
You spoke about proactiveness.
Yes.
And of course, if you know, there is a little bit of issues of flooding in Ogun State currently.
Yes.
On the newspaper headlines, we had read that the government had come out to tell people, please vacate this place, there's going to be flood here. And then you find out that people are just unwilling to move. Now, you won't blame them necessarily, because a lot of people had invested so much in what it is that they are. And just like you said earlier on, they had paid, somebody had approved that I could build here. And then you see people being reluctant to move because it was approved by a government official, in quotes. And then you're telling me to move without, conciliation or providing a solution. What do you do in such situations?
Like you just rightly pointed out, I mean, government has to provide all the support. It's not easy for somebody to move. Where are they moving to? Maybe IDP camps. What are the facilities there? What provision has been made to check maybe outbreak of diseases and all that. So it's really very difficult for people to migrate because they feel that they do not have adequate support. And when you go to some of these IDPs and you see the condition of living there, but some people would rather remain at their houses and get swept away by flood than go to and live under such conditions. So Nigeria needs to be very proactive, like I had said, because humanitarian crisis, we do not have the wherewithal, to manage all the crises that could come out of this, right? We still have the crisis in the northeast. We still have a lot of people displaced out of because of flooding and all that. So we really need to be proactive as government to ensure that we manage and forestall these things from happening the best we can. Because I mean, Nigeria is going through a lot. We're dealing with so many things. So having this humanitarian crisis, maybe because of issue of natural disasters and all that, could also be very expensive for us to manage. So we really need to, prevention, they say, is better than cure, right? So it's more investments that you make in preventing, you cannot compare to what you spend when you want to cure the situation.
So if flooding continues the way it is going right now, you have it in the west, you have it in the northeast, you have it literally almost everywhere right now. If it continues like this, what's the long-term implication?
Outbreak of diseases, displacing of people, people are already displaced, mortality, the impacts are severe. Of course, socioeconomic consequences, when people lose their source of livelihood, some of these people, for instance, who live along the banks, they depend on those bodies for survival. Some of them are fishermen, some of them are into farming, some kind of farming, some of them are into activities that deal directly from, with water and all that. So when this flood comes, these people lose their livelihood, their source of livelihood, and it worsens the poverty crisis, in the country, which also has a way to worsen insecurity, so it's a complex interplay of consequences. And so that's why we preach that we must be, and of course, government also should invest more in the area of research, right, to see how we can be able to navigate through some of these things with innovation, right? I had mentioned that there's need for us to look at constructing more dams along those basins. That's something that we need to begin to look at, all right? And of course, the issue of climate change is still there, which is also another very big issue. So government also has to begin to look. We know that we are we are not among the high carbon emitting countries. Our carbon profile is low, but then we must begin to position ourselves to begin to draw finance, climate finance, to be able to help us, adapt to the impacts of climate change. Because whether you like it or not, communities are going through a lot. Staying in any good town, you may not understand what somebody who lives very close to the bank is facing, especially at this time. So there's a lot to be done in helping communities to adapt. So there's need for a lot of investment. There's need for a lot of financing. So government must begin to think in that direction to see how we can position Nigeria. I mean, there's a lot of funds available for climate finance. How do we position ourselves? Nigeria is not doing as we ought to. Countries like Algeria, South Africa are doing way better than us in attracting some of this investment. So government must position, overhaul the castle of climate change, ensure we have very competent people there to be able to position the country to draw financing to help us through all this.
Yeah, well, you're talking about strategic adaptive measures, for people who are prone to these flooding areas. We have I think that was from the newspaper headlines some time ago about the flooding that happened in Maiduguri. A lot of millions of naira, we just given to them to, cope any losses and all of that. But we are seeing the infrastructural use of this money, where this money is being channeled to, what they are meant to be used for, and all of that. So but I'm wondering, when you keep on saying we need money, we need finances, more finances, and all of that, what exactly is that finances supposed to do?
Well, that's a very important question. For instance, what happened in Maiduguri, there's been warning that dam constructed around 1980 something, it wasn't in the best shape. And this is not the first time the dam is failing, right? And I mean, what has government been able to do? So when I'm talking about more finances, I mean not just finances that government manages, right? Both the private sector, we just need more money. Sometimes some of these issues are tied to the fact that there is no adequate investment to make some of these things happen. If you want to talk about constructing a dam, it's not a project that will cost 1,000 naira. That's a humongous project which needs a lot of financing. And financing, not just about government bringing money. We have development partners. So we're saying that we should position ourselves to be attractive, to be able to draw some of this.
But I think the flood is already attracting money, because I know the way Nigeria is moving, they don't give out this money way before the flood. Yes, or there's a crisis, and when the crisis come, you begin to hear money coming in from different, even the private sector and all of that. But my question is, where is this money going into? What exactly should this money be used for?
Yes, for instance, like you had mentioned, our approach is normally a fire brigade approach. We are more, we want it to happen. Most times we are not proactive. But for it, I give you a little instance. When you have floods overtake a city, it's going to destroy maybe roads, which were built with money. It's going to destroy schools, which were built with money. Destroy houses, farmlands, and all that. Right? If you had done something to prevent those floods from happening in the first place, you're going to save those monies that would have gone to reconstructing those roads, reconstructing those schools, handling the diseases, the outbreak of diseases that may result because of those floods. So let's be more responsive. Let's be more proactive, not responsive,
than
rather.
reactive.
Yes, than reactive, because that's the way out. So government also needs to, and there are a lot of agencies that walk around. We have the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, we have NIMET, and all these agencies. They need adequate funding for research, like I said, and not just research, not just about research. They also need money to be able to execute some of the things that we need. More funding for the river basin authorities to be able to help, ensure that agricultural settlements, along those basins, have what it takes to withstand some of these shocks when they come.
Okay, so Africa is connected.
Yes.
And if countries like Niger Republic, Benin Republic, and Cameroon releases or open their dam, it will affect us.
Yes.
So how can Nigeria of course you said we should put ourselves in a position where we're attractive for investors to come in.
Yeah.
But these ones, we don't even need investors, because these are our fellow African countries that we can meet and converse with.
Yeah.
What do you think that Nigeria should do to, speak to them and prepare? Just like you said, we should be more of proactive than reactive.
Yeah.
If Cameroon wants to release their dam, Nigeria should prepare, of course, because it will affect us.
Yes.
But what do you think? What's your perspective?
And I know that when some of these things happen, they offer warnings, they issue out warnings to tell you that this is going to happen. So the question now is, how do you manage? What's your response to some of these emergencies?
Yes.
You know, so like I said, the dams that we have are inadequate to manage because water level is rising, whether you like it or not. No matter how shy you want to be about it, that's the real fact. Water level is rising. So how, you know, are you going to be able to take proactive measures? If you, for instance, tell Cameroon not to release water, you know, from the Kalu Dam and all that, so invariably you're telling them to maybe allow the flood to take over their own communities, and that wouldn't be something that they would want to do, right? So, like you said, this is a flow, right? So we must be, you know, we must be very careful to know what happens upland, so that when these waters are released, you know, we're able to contain them. And I keep mentioning that there's need for us to invest more, you know, in constructing dams and all that. Dams could also help in power generation, hydropower generation. There are a lot of benefits attached to it. So these are that's why I said we need more financing to be able to, you know, revamp the infrastructure around these basins to be able to help us curb the impact of flooding when it happens.
Okay, so before we let you go because of time, now that we are the reactive kind of people and flooding has overtaken cities, what's your recommendation or what's your thoughts, or no, not thoughts now, what's your recommendation to people who are in such positions?
Well, we must begin to plan more, you know, take action more, right? Because it's happened this year. It doesn't stop it from happening next year. You know, we've had issues of flooding. It's more like it's now a yearly thing, you know. So what are the lessons that we can take away from this year's crisis? What are the lessons that we're going to learn to help us prepare better for next year? So like I said, government must begin to, you know, this is a national emergency and we must treat it as such, right? Government must begin to invest more, you know, look at it more, you know, because we cannot afford another humanitarian crisis in Nigeria. There are way too many for us to handle at this point. So whatever we can do to be able to mitigate, like I said, we will not be able to entirely stop it from happening. But how do we ensure that when it happens, you know, it happens in the least, you know, the impacts are least felt, right? That's the question. So government needs to do more. Development partners need to do more. A lot of awareness, you know, people, the little that people can do, like ensuring that waterways are cleared, they are not clogged by our refugees, you know, by our waste, you know, a lot of sensitization, a lot of awareness, you know, is something that everybody needs to come together. A collective action is needed. And I believe if we're able to take some of these steps, it's going to help us, you know, navigate through some of these challenges.
Okay, just a last question before, you know, we'll let you go.
Yeah.
Government agencies, you know, like you said, they have been giving out warnings to related people living in these related areas,
Yes,
about flooding, about incoming flooding and all of that. But it's not easy for a middle class or low class citizen, yes, who is just surviving to relocate, to, yes, pack up to another place.
Yes.
So what exactly would you want to advise Nigerians or citizens to do, and loudly to their hearing, that they can be able to, you know, avert this in terms of flooding?
Well, it's just that we know that, you know, people are really, really challenged when it comes to this. I mean, migrating is not a problem. Even when you live in the urban settlement, you want to move from one place to the other, you know, it's not easy. You know, talk more of maybe you are told to leave your home. Some of them, they own these houses, you know, and you're told to leave your house to where exactly? You know, no support, no, maybe to an IDP camp. Where are these IDP camps? A secondary school somewhere, you know, without sanitation facilities, without health facilities. You're just told to go and stay there, you know. So, but then we just have to find a way to survive, because if you want to, you know, close your ears to these warnings and you remain there, there are chances that you could get swept away by the flood, you know. So I mean, it's just I mean, it's really a dicey situation. But people have to be responsive to these issues. You know, it's better you find you know, there's hope if you're alive, right? But the hope ends when you're dead. So when issues like this happen, you know, let's find a way to move. You know, we'll survive. We're Nigerians. We're resilient, very resilient people, and government should also be more responsive to some of these humanitarian crises.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilfred
Thank you so
Okeke,
much.
environmental expert. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank
I
you.
hope, government keep hearing these things. We keep talking about it and they keep hearing about it. And even the people out there who are prone to these areas, they should know what to do in terms of, management, in terms of avoiding even open defecation, and deforestation, all of these things, factors that can, make flooding, that can incur much more impact of flooding to their lives. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you so much.
we'll be moving ahead to another discussion, another program. You didn't go anywhere after this.